Well, it's Tuesday, June the 15th.
16th?
16th, yes.
Yeah,
welcome to your perfect morning starter on Channels Television. Of course, we're up bright and early as always and ready to help you make sense of all the big stories in the last 24 hours and, of course, give you information that you can use. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Jeffrey Uzama Bukola. I was listening to the radio today on my way here, and people are literally, just like you always talk about, literally lamenting about the cost of, PMS. So I'm a career
story of our lives.
but especially people are also lamenting about the cost of cooking gas, which is very expensive. I think I'm going to stop by the gas station maybe a few days from now to just check how much it was. Because the last time I did check out, it was for 12.5 kg for the LPG, which we'll call the cooking gas. I bought about, if I can remember, maybe almost 18,000. I know it's 17,800 or in that region. And PMS, of course, is still high. And I'm looking at the numbers or the reports. The Brent crude is now about $82, $83 per barrel from where it was before. So people are really expecting. But remember, the Iran-US agreement is going to be signed on Friday. So the market is still watching. So I don't see the price being adjusted. But I can guarantee, almost to a very large extent, that if crude oil price comes down to a certain point, inevitably the refiners will have to drop their gantry price so that you and I can buy at the price we expect it to buy. And if it keeps going down, we expect even more. Lower price, because they're concerned, because as you said, in Nigeria, when it comes to prices, when they go up, they never come down. But on this one, because it's a commodity that is globally priced in dollars, so, and the highest component of it is crude oil. If you look at the cost element of what constitutes how it gets to you, and you buy at the price you buy, you see that crude oil is a significant, super significant in terms, maybe up on 70% of the entire cost. Then levies, fees, transportation, or premium costs, all of that put together brings it to that point. But I can understand the pains of Nigerians. It's a very challenging period. But this is what I will say, Bukola. And it is a premise on which I will engage the president, his people, and the alternative or the opposition. I did say yesterday that whenever it comes to fiscal policy or when it comes to public finance management or public accounts management, the leadership of President Bola Tinubu, who is a neoliberal capitalist in my view, has prioritized fiscal policy or fiscal sustainability and revenue generation over the cost of living. Now, no matter how they want to argue it, that is the practical data we're seeing. So if you look at the macro, is making gains in some areas as far as that priority is concerned. And when you look at the micro, there's a significant failure as to how it affects you. It's literally downside risks of the policy is that all of us are taking big hits from PMS price to gas price to electricity price to general cost of living. So it's a choice the president has made. Now Nigerians have to make a choice whether they will keep him on the job or is in the right thing, or they will take him out. Bukola.
Well, Jeffrey, you just narrated what appears to be the story of our lives. When I say our lives, now everyone now, but specifically the mothers in the kitchen who do the cooking. So sometimes we don't even bother checking, and this could be a symptomatic of, being average middle class, a bit comfortable, because others, as we talked about the other day on the program, have resorted to, coal, charcoal for cooking. Sometimes you don't bother checking the price anymore. When you get to the gas station, you just say, how much is it? 18,000 naira for 12.5 kg or 18,750. I thought I bought you 15,000 the last time. And that's exactly the situation at the moment. And I was reading the other day that the federal government has ordered the NMDPRA to shore up imports of LPG to bring down the cost of cooking gas. Well, there hasn't been a reactionary statement from the NMDPRA to that effect, but it tells you where we are as far as, the cost of commodities, the basics that you require for everyday living, LPG, petrol, tells you where we are as far as that is concerned. And Jeffrey, it makes me wonder, about the latest inflation figure for the month of May, which talks about inflation going up to 15.09%. Am I correct, Jeffrey?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 15.09%. And Jeffrey, I had to go back and check what the inflation figure was in February when the Middle East conflict began. And it's interesting to see that in February, inflation figure was 15.06%. And at the time, we were purchasing petrol for somewhere between 759 naira per litre and 850 naira per litre, depending on where you are in different parts of the country. And so how come, we've had that significant increase from about 850 naira per litre to 1,280 or 1,350, depending on where you are. And inflation has only moderated with about 0.3%, because the figures do not make sense to me. Perhaps they make sense to Jeffrey, and Jeffrey will weigh in on this, I'm sure. So how come what we have seen is a very insignificant moderation in inflation figures? It really doesn't make sense. And I'm sure that the story you're telling right now, where your pocket is concerned, is an entirely different one. I'm sure you're spending more on petrol, you're spending a lot more on transportation, you're spending a lot more on LPG, as we've talked about. Perhaps that you have to buy only in every 2 months, depending on the quantum of cooking that you do at home. You're spending more on how much do you have left to spend on food, by the way? And yet macroeconomic indicators are showing positive, which the administration keeps boasting about, and our realities are at variance with these macroeconomic indicators. Well, we require explanations from the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics and Economists this morning. I'm handing this over to Jeffrey now to see if he can give me answers.
Well, I don't have all the answers. I must be very honest, but I have always had problems. You know that since the rebasing started. Now, I don't have a problem with rebasing. You have to rebase every 5 years so that you reflect current realities. So the basket was increased from 700 and something to 900 and something in terms of the items in that basket. Then there's something called Koi Cup. I don't want to go to the explanation, with 13 divisions from 12. So there was more of a reapportioning of the percentage on how it affects the entire basket. And that was where my problem started from, when food was reduced from I think 50 to about 40 or so. And then there was another place they increased it astronomically. I knew that when the core component of the analytics has been adjusted that much, what will happen is that the outcome will always be what it is. I have had problem agreeing with the numbers, and the MBS, I'm sure they have known this, but they've defended their position. That is the official number we have. Looking at the US inflation numbers, year on year, it went from the last month, it was 3.8, this month is 4.2. Ours is still oscillating within those percentage as well. So they will tell you that based on their own analytics, this is where they are and this is what they're calculating. So, Bukola, it is what we have in terms of the data. But what the numbers actually reflect is the rate of change. That is what inflation numbers actually are, the rate of change. So if it was 22%, that means 22% in terms of the rate of change. If it's 15, it has decelerated. It's still increasing, but the pace of increase. So you can now use your own reality. So what happens is that when you bring all the elements in that basket and the Koi Cup classification, one takes it up, another brings it down, and then when you look at the entire number, it affects the entire outcome. But where we also have a problem is the curve between the inflation number, which is around 15 point now, as I'm talking about it, because I'm just laughing, which is about 15 point now, and our interest rate, which is still at very, very high, 26 point something percent. That's why some economists will say that the CBN doesn't believe the numbers coming from the MBS itself, because when the inflation was just going up, CBN kept pursuing it with aggressive monetary policy to bring it down, now that we have said it has come down, I think this thing has come down consecutively almost before this Iran war. It came down almost 7 or 9 times, maybe by 10%.
So you see the highlights there. Land on your thoughts, Jeffrey, but see the highlights there. 15.93, that's headline inflation. See food inflation there, which is 16.96%. But the reality is that food prices are going up. And this has been aggravated by insecurity in Nigeria's north. But land on your thoughts, I just wanted to draw attention to that.
Yeah, so we're literally saying the same thing. At the end of the day, it's about how they come up. So one other point where I used to argue with this inflation number is how the monetary policy is responding to inflation numbers. There is a way it's supposed to respond that shows me that they believe the numbers. So I may be a part of the school of thought of economists who feel that the monetary policy is also cautious about the numbers that the MBS is releasing. It's a bit technical, but this is the most simplistic way I can. So it's supposed to be like a 4 to 5% differential. So if the inflation number is 15, I expect the interest rate to be about maybe 20 or so. But again, the monetary authority, in working with the fiscal authority, there's a priority of this government to stabilize the currency. So now that we have a stable currency, fairly stable, but pretty high, the FPIs will keep coming in to help us manage our, FX accretion need. So that's why you see our, what did they call that thing? Capital importation is quite the biggest component of capital importation, like the FPI. So you see it's in the stock market, because if you invest in bonds, if you invest in equities, treasury bills, your return, especially for treasury bills, is going to be pretty good. What they call carry trading. So it's. I don't know whether I gave you an answer or I just
you didn't give me an answer. Whatever the case, nearly 500 naira increase in the pump price of petrol between February and June, reflecting in 0.3% numbers in inflation differential. Looks to me like the calculator of the NBS is broken, because it doesn't reflect what the reality of Nigerians really are. And you talked about...
Their counter-argument would be that it is not just energy that is the only component of bringing out headline inflation numbers. There are almost 1,000 items in that basket, classified into 13 divisions. So when you mop up all those numbers, some will take it up, some will bring it down. When you average it, that's what they got these numbers. But I still don't totally agree with their numbers.
We could look at all of the other service sectors which are contributors, but that would expand the conversation. There are other talking points this morning which also form part of our conversation.
Don't worry, but at least I'm not defending them. Or trust me, I'm not. Because I don't even agree with them.
I understand. I know they're just trying to bring perspective, from the position of the government, and that's part of the story. But we can also tell you this morning that the Federal High Court Abuja has ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to deregister the African Democratic Congress, ADC, and 4 other political parties over alleged failure to meet constitutional requirements for continued registration. Justice Peter Lifu made the order in a judgment on Monday, wherein he noted that the affected parties breached Section 225 of the Nigerian Constitution. The section gives INEC the power to deregister political parties that fail to win any elective position or 25% of the votes in the previous round of elections in the federal, state, and local government levels. And the judgment, if immediately enforced, is bound to lead to a deluge of disqualification of candidates running for elective offices in the 2027 general elections and the upcoming off-cycle governorship elections slated for June and August this year in Ekiti and Osun State. And of course, the ADC has gone right ahead to react to this, saying that it would not stand and picking holes in the judgment. In fact, the title of the statement of the African Democratic Congress is "You're Playing with Fire." ADC warns government agents seeking party registration, and they have described Justice Peter Lifu as a threat to democracy. Now, Jeffrey, we started off, behind the cameras talking about this, and I was asking, very critical questions. I hope that, hover around this conversation. Political parties seek registration, perhaps almost every election cycle. And if they haven't gone to the polls to be tested to determine whether they have the capacity to win presidential elections or maybe even governorship elections, does it then mean that if they fail to meet this requirement of Section 225 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, then they're unable to participate or find expression in the electoral process? And so does it then, mean that this portion of the section of the Constitution excludes the, right of association, political expression of groups? Jeffrey?
It's a very delicate balance, Bukola, what you're asking me, because I'm trying to go back to, I'm trying to look at that portion of the electoral
Constitution.
Yes. So Section 225. So we're going to explore this. I'm not going to dwell on it. The lawyer, the senior advocate will be here to break it down. So the registration of political parties, the Independent National Electoral Commission shall have the power to deregister a political party. There's a breach in the requirement, if there's a failure to win at least 25% of votes in one state of the federation in a presidential election, one local government of a state in a governorship election, failure to win at least one ward in a chairmanship election, one seat in national or state houses of assembly election, and one seat in a councillorship election. So you see there are criteria for each cycle of election, but I'll leave the senior advocate to break it down. The first question we'll ask, all of these 5 parties, did they participate in, let's begin with the presidential election? If they did participate in the presidential election, were they able to score at least 25% of the votes in at least one state of the federation? That is one question to ask.
And one more, Jeffrey.
And then that is one question to ask. And then the issue of, you can trickle it down to governorship, councillorship. So first we need to establish whether these parties actually fielded presidential candidate and how they perform, which is going to be a premise. But there's also, I think there is a stay, I saw an enrolled order of court about, I think, a stay of execution because there's a case pending in court. So I don't know why Justice Lifu will be adjudicating over a case that is pending in a court. So that is where the things that happen in the judiciary becomes very disturbing and very concerning. And then the other layer is a bit more political than legal, which is where the ADC perhaps is coming from. That the APC is doing all it can to make sure that Bola Tinubu, the president, doesn't have any competition.
Stands alone on the ballot.
And that is very dangerous. So they will use all kinds of means, legal, maybe illegal means in their view, to see how they can. Because the real opposition, the real threats, me, I don't like mincing words and deceiving myself. There are only 2 parties that can square up against APC, and they are NDC and the ADC.
But every other party, it's not a 4-horse race.
Yes, every other party, with greatest respect, they will do their best, but I don't like deceiving ourselves. So the biggest, so if this ADC and NDC, so people can say, and when there's a political argument that makes me laugh. They say, after all, there are 21 political parties in Nigeria. No, not all 21 political parties have the stature to contest the election at that level, which is why the Section 225A is there.
Has come up.
Yeah, so it's not so you can have even 50 political parties, but they can just be participants, not contenders. The only contenders, in my view, from what I have seen in this election right now, it may change tomorrow. There's APC, there's ADC, there's NDC. Every other one.
It's funny that
at the presidential level, Jeffrey, every other one, they will do their best, but I don't know.
It's funny, it just occurred to me that in 2026, how many years after the PDP lost elections, we're not even mentioning the PDP in the mix as potential political parties that stand any chance to win an election. But this particular topic, that is hinged on Section 225 of the Constitution is an interesting talking point that makes us reflect on the ideals that form our grundnorm, our Constitution. But there's one more question that I need to ask, and which is, the ADC was in existence prior to 2023, am I correct?
Yes.
So how come the plaintiffs didn't remember that, the ADC and others were in breach of this particular part of the Constitution, and they've only just, remembered months to the next general election? That's another part of the,
so we need to go and look
conversation.
at, we need to,
we need to take a moment now,
yes,
right?
We need to go and look at the data. That's why I say I need to look at the data of how they performed in the presidential election, for instance, in the last election. First, whether they fielded candidates, ADC did field candidates, whether they fielded candidates, and whether that candidate was able to score 25% in one state. But I also brought the political convo, which is the most delicate part, that if you go through this process and knock off these guys and they can't find themselves in the ballot, we may be joking with some trouble. But I'm sorry, you mentioned PDP. PDP is not ready yet. As far as the presidential election, with greatest respect to Nyesom Wike and the rest of them, I don't see them ready yet for this election.
I don't think Mr. Wike wants the PDP to be ready.
They are not ready.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I challenged my friend Jugundu. I said, show me one press release that shows that you are an opposition party. Mr. Jugundu, he has not given me one. But
we're still waiting.
When Turaki people act, he will release a press statement. So
we're still waiting.
It's just a joke on the side.
We'll take a moment now. When we return, of course, it'll be time to tell you how the papers are reporting the biggest stories. Stay with the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television.